everyone, it's Megan Ramos, and welcome to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by two of my most favorite people. First, my lovely co-host, Dr. Nadia Pataguana. Nadia, how are you doing today?
Hi, Megan. Hi, everyone.
Well, we are super excited because our lovely guest today is one of our colleagues who all of you who have totally raved about when we've had her on. And we're so glad that she's able to come back and talk about some fall trends that we are seeing in the fasting method community. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Terri Lance back to the show.
Hi, Megan. Hi, Nadia. Great to be here.
Welcome back. So you are definitely our hottest guest. Most downloaded episodes. Everybody loves hearing Dr. Terri share her words of wisdom. And we are seeing a lot of people come back from what is sort of the real, real summer experience for the first time in the last 2 years because of the COVID lockdown. So everywhere in the world has gone from different phases of lockdown to transitioning into a form of new normal, back to what is almost a normal. And we saw tons and tons of people traveling this summer, reconnecting with friends and family that they haven't seen in a long time. And when we socialize with our communities, we do tend to eat a bit. So there's a lot of individuals that are really looking to this time between now and Thanksgiving to get the weight off that they gained in the summer and really start to make headways towards their end of the year goals. And Terri, you run so many of our groups on healthy habits and mindset around food. What are you seeing people talk about or struggle with this fall?
Megan, I think it's, what you said is that people tend to put a lot of pressure on this time of year. And I encourage people to almost back off from that a little bit. It reminds me a little bit of the January 1st, where everyone's going to go to the gym for 3 hours every day. And, that lasts like one day. So I see a lot of people putting so much pressure on themselves that this beginning of the fall is when everything's got to happen. And I think it's important to really look at this is the time to build great habits that will carry you through the whole year and to see this as an entire journey, not a 2-month rapid race that you're going to accomplish and then ride it out for the next 4 months. I think this is a great time to work on, like I said, those habits that will carry you through and the mindset that will carry you through so that you don't have to go through the year in fits and spurts.
I think something that people struggle with is finding that motivation and that mindset. So they come out of the summer and they're feeling really pumped. They're like, I know when I fast and when I eat right, I feel fantastic. And they're so motivated to want to feel fantastic again. And they feel very pressured, as you said, to do habits, A, B, C, D, and E. What have you found sort of been the best strategy? If someone was looking between now and Thanksgiving to implement those 5 habits, 4 or 5 habits to start with, do you recommend someone starts with one habit once a week or maybe introducing another habit every couple of weeks? How do they eventually get to incorporating their goals when it comes to habit development?
That's a great question. I think it depends a little bit on what those habits are, how complicated or how big they feel. I think if you're tackling one that's really big for you, so for example, I think many people coming back from the summer, one of the habits they want to tackle is the snacking and grazing. That's a pretty big one for most of us. So I would not tack on 2 or 3 others at the same time. I would focus solely on that one at first. But let's say one of your habits is I want to drink more water. For many of us, that's one that can be incorporated a little more easily. So I could pair that one up with a couple of others or one other. But I think if you're going to tackle one that's really a big shift for you, I would encourage one at a time until you gain some competence and confidence with that habit. Then you're ready to add another one. But a lot of us want to take everything on at once, and it's so overwhelming that we only make it 4 or 5 days in and we're already dropping out because it's just too complicated. So pacing yourself, I think, is really important. Choose a big one, do it alone. By itself. If you're choosing some small ones that you think you can incorporate pretty easily, you could do 2 of those at a time.
I have a kind of a follow-up question to that, Terry, because this is a question that I'm getting a lot lately, especially because it is the fall and recovery for many people. So very specifically about that, it's music to my ears to hear you say to tackle the full meals, no snacks, always first before you move on to anything else. I'm a big fan of TRE. I often talk about time restricted eating, full meals, no snacks, as it being the Beyonce of the show, the foundation to a strong intermittent fasting lifestyle. But I get this question all the time, and you probably do too. So let's ask the expert. When people say to me, okay, fine, I'll do TRE, but how long until I can do some longer fast? When do I know I'm ready to go from TRE to doing overnight fast, for example? Do you get that question a lot? And if you do, what do you answer people? Because I know they're looking for a timeline, and I know that's just impossible because it's so N equals one, right? So individual to know when somebody's ready. But what do you tell people when they ask you, like, how do I know I'm ready to jump from one big goal to the next, specifically TRE to more extended fast?
That is a really good question, Nadia. I think the most important thing to think about is kind of what I just mentioned about the competence and confidence. If you can do the skill that you're working on well, then you're ready to stretch to the next one. What many people tend to do is they try to stretch to the next three before they've really mastered this one. This is one of the reasons I emphasize in the very beginning of this, not putting so much time pressure on yourself. You do not have to accomplish your entire weight loss goals by October 23rd. You need to build habits that will last a lifetime. And this is just one leg of that. So if you think about it, I'm going to work on time restricted eating first. It may take some people a few weeks. And I think oftentimes people might give themselves a couple of days and then I'm going to start the longer fast. Or I'll do 1 week of TRE and then I'm going to jump into the longer fast. And for so many of us, that is just too rapid. We have not really built the habit of TRE and we're already turning up the fasting dial. And those of you who have listened to me before, you know I talk a lot about the dial of intensity. If you can't do 2 meals a day, let's say 18-6 consistently, you're not ready to move to 24. So you build that in and then you stretch. And if you're not ready to do 24s consistently, and I don't mean every day, but every other day, then you're not yet ready to move up to a 36 or a 42. But that doesn't mean you're failing. That means you're skill building. You're helping your body and your brain get into this habit. And then you can start to turn the dial up.
I realized that I just asked you like one of the toughest questions, but I'm so glad that I did because this is hands down, I think what people most struggle with, this concept. Today in 2 of my groups, we talked immensely about this. Again, being the time of year that it is, a lot of people either starting or restarting. We have people today, somebody in my group said, I feel like I went back to grade 1, but I really want to do it right this time. I want to do TRE. And I said, awesome. What a great opportunity it would be for all of us if we were able to go back to grade 1 or even kindergarten. How much more would we actually learn? Now that we know how important those initial grades in our children's lives are. But it's the same thing with TRE. And I reminded them, remember this from school, the better you did in grade 6, the better you're going to do in grade 7. So do TRE right. Take your time. I'm so glad that you said, even if it takes a few weeks, because that's exactly what I'm hoping that people are going to hear from you. The better they do with TRE, the better they're going to do with every other step of their fasting if they take it to another step.
The other thing about that I want to say that you really highlighted, Nadia, is I think coming to the fasting method, learning about fasting, it is very tempting to jump all in and focus on fasting. I think this pattern is very similar to old-fashioned dieting. You're going to do something drastic without building in actual foundational change. And I think some people come into fasting so excited about the power of fasting that they don't work on building the foundational skills. They jump right into the really exciting fasting part. And then when they struggle with that, or if they need to back off of that for some reason, everything kind of falls apart. Same as our old dieting mentality. Do something really drastic, but that's not sustainable. And then you gain back all of the weight or whatever. So I think it's so important to look at what are the foundational skills I need to make this last for the rest of my life. And TRE is so important. And what you eat, your relationship with food. Because I see so many people in our community really struggle with, they build that fasting muscle and they get really good at fasting, but they haven't worked out that relationship with food. And that causes the fasting to eventually backfire or not be as productive as they want it to be, which is pretty defeating to feel like I'm doing this amazing thing, I'm fasting, and I'm not seeing the results I want because they haven't worked on the TRE and they haven't worked on the relationship with food.
You read my mind. That's what I was going to ask you next.
When I started fasting, it was just a couple of weeks after being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. It was my job to essentially watch people die from diabetes and monitor their death. I mean, that was not the intention of my job, but that was the reality of my job. And it was devastating. So this diagnosis really shook me. And then I learned about fasting from talking with Jason at the clinic. And it just made so much sense. And I thought, okay, I've found this superpower. Just like many of you who are listening today or our community members, coaching participants, like you've found the superpower and you've seen it. And now you've seen it today in 2022, you've seen it replicated all over the place. So many people are having these great successes with fasting. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm young. Sure, I'm sick. I'm not that sick. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to do a 7-day fast. Like I heard Beyonce did one with some lemon juice and cayenne pepper. Like I can do a 7-day fast if she can. And I nearly died. like not actually physically, but I was not feeling good physically and mentally around the 20-hour mark. And I realized, like everything else, I was a perfectionist in life. So everything was taken to the extreme. Go the extra mile, go the extra distance. And, that's what it took to succeed and to conquer. And started to reflect at certain points in your life that attitude really serves you very well. But there's certain places of your life that as you get older and have more experiences where that mindset is not of a good service to you. And at 27, I'm 38 now, I was 27 at the time, I had enough of those negative life experiences going down that pathway to say, Megan, you've got to put your perfectionist on the back burner. She just needs to sit there. She needs to be quiet. And you need to take this slow and steady because that's the only way you're going to succeed at this. Because my radical attempts was not very good. And so it was not going to be that way for me. And it was easy because I had that fear of diabetes and I had some of this experience knowing from falling down, going that perfectionist, drastic, radical approach to taking a step back and doing things gradually that I could have success. So I knew this was really sort of key for my success and just those experiences that I had in that life and some guidance that I had received from family members helping me navigate challenging times, it really served me well. And with a consistent plan of not doing any extended fasting whatsoever, I reversed years and years worth of disease, like PCOS that I had at 14, fatty liver disease that I had at 12. But it's so hard for individuals to get into that mindset. So, we've just talked about the importance of really mastering some of these basics like the TRE, really, not putting our relationship with food on the back burner and saying, hey, we'll get to it when we get to it. But what are some tips or strategies that you found work really well for having someone transition from that, all or nothing, go big or go home mindset to saying, hey, it is okay if it takes me X number of days, weeks, or months to get to a particular goal, whether it's a certain fasting protocol, a blood sugar goal, a weight loss goal. What mindset tips do you think help serve people trying to adopt a more sensible approach to this?
For me, I think there are two general things I encourage people to think about. And I use the example of running, not because I think everyone should become a runner or because everyone is a runner, but I think it's one that we can visualize and imagine. If you decided you wanted to run a marathon, which is kind of the ultimate measure of success as a runner for many people. You would not expect yourself to run 26 miles this week. If you were not a runner, if you were sitting on the couch and said, hey, I'm going to learn to run a marathon, you would build into it gradually. The first accomplishment would be if you could run 1 mile or for 2 minutes and then go from there. But no one who decides to run a marathon goes out and runs 18 miles the next day. They have to build up gradually. And that's what we have to do in changing our whole kind of health journey. We can't do it this week. We need to do one step to get started, and then we add new steps. And then the other analogy or thought I usually share is to think about, if you really want this to be a lifelong journey, there's no race, because finishing quickly means finishing life. So taking this on as, I'm going to focus on my health and my weight for the rest of my life. I want to do it in a healthy way. There's no, I'm going to do it in 2 months and then be done with it. Some of people in our community hear me talk about an analogy often of mowing the lawn. If you like to have a nice lawn, you do not mow it once in June and then for the rest of the summer just sit back and watch it. You have to keep tending to it. And so changing that mindset that this is going to be a one and done event. This is a lifelong journey we're on. And we need to be open to the changes that happen. Your lawn changes throughout the summer. It has different needs throughout the summer. Your body, your life is going to have different needs. And so really working on that mindset. I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not going to run the marathon next week. I'm not going to mow my lawn once, but I'm really in this to build the lifelong skills that will carry me to the ultimate goals that I have.
I think it's so important. People really don't put this pressure on themselves to fit into this box 24/7, because that's what so many people do. And there's factors that are just totally out of your control. Just like you said, the lawn's needs at the end of the summer are different than it is at the beginning of the summer. Our needs from 1 week to the next could be different. One of the things we do at the fasting method that Terri and I do is we lead these group challenges. There's a fasting nutritional component, and then there's behavior change component to it as well, to help make the challenge successful, sustainable, to help address some of the underlying issues that are the reason why these challenges exist. Like TRE was a challenge that we had going on in September. We're doing back to basics, September reset type of challenge. But what we used to do is we used to do these weekly challenges, and it worked really well during COVID when people were locked down and everybody was working from home. It gave them something new and fresh to do every week. And what I think was really special about the group of individuals that joined the community within COVID is because they saw that they could change things week to week with the challenges that we were doing, and that aided their results, and that it was okay to ebb and flow and to pivot. And we've got this incredible group of volunteers. We call them our community mentors. And, we all bonded through our very lengthy lockdown periods, and they lead some community peer-led groups. And they're always focusing on the art of pivoting, pivoting in the summertime, around holidays. This is something that I noticed in their conversations. This is a topic that they feel needs to come up for them because it was such a critical part of their journey that they learned during COVID. But then we enter this post-COVID era to a certain extent. The virus is here to stay, but it's changed. And, because of that change, we can start to do things like we used to do them to a certain extent. So people are back at work at least a few days of the week. Life has changed, and our community said to us, hey, this isn't working for us anymore. And I was a little bit hesitant, because to set a challenge for an entire month You got to think, because someone's going to change every week, and you got to address, you got to show people to change it up. So important. And I think that us doing it in the challenges, we started doing this in July, August, September. I think we're in our third month of doing it this way. And it's been successful over the summer. We've been able to help people not necessarily totally lock in. And the summer is definitely given into some ease of people understanding that they need to pivot, but the fall is really challenging. What I'm seeing is a lot of plans for extensive extended fasting. When people do lots and lots of extended fasts back to back, there are definitely issues that can be physiological, but there are some mindset issues too, because it does become socially isolating and you do end up missing out on certain things. And Nadia and I always coined 2016 as a year of fasting burnout. When fasting started to gain a lot of popularity and people thought, okay, if one day of fasting for us is better, 365 days of fasting would be awesome. And Nadia and I just remember sort of staring at each other at the clinic one day. Why is everybody trying to do 12 weeks of 5-day fasts back to back? And this is not going to end well. And without fail, those who didn't have physical complications, they had mindset complications. And then we didn't see them for like 2 or 3 months. And they came back after 2 or 3 months of binging on all kinds of foods. I won't say during our fasting podcast that they didn't want to be part of their foods. As you so famously say in our program, you have your foods and you have things that are not your foods anymore. And so what are some of the mindset things people should be thinking about if they are going to start to experiment with a little bit of extended fasting this fall? We don't want them doing it too often. We always tell them, maybe once, every couple of months, if you can do one, you should do one. But what are some mindset things to help people stop getting into the, I need to do all these fasts, back to back, and some of the concerns that might come up from a mindset perspective if they try to do them?
This is so true. We definitely saw that in 2016, but we still see that today. And I like to remind people that in our experience, the people that are best at doing extended fasting, quote unquote, or find it even possible to do, are not necessarily the people that we've seen do better in the long term. So it's always a really great reminder. I use our personal experiences, right? Like I've always been really strong with TRE, and that's really, I think, the key to my success. Whereas my husband, his very first fast was a 12-day fast. I've always mentioned this. And to this day, he's still great at extended fasting, but he's still struggling with TRE. And so people like that have a much harder time maintaining their progress and even getting to their eventual goal.
I think it's important, if you're considering working on some longer fasts, that you really get in touch with what your motivation is. And I think sometimes it's the shiny object. It's the bigger number of weight loss that you see in that 1 week or something. But to recognize that doesn't mean it's the longer term benefit, as both of you just mentioned. I think the important thing that most of us need to really be honest with ourselves about when it comes to thinking about doing extended fasting, especially if we're wanting to do them frequently, is, are we using long-term fasting or extended fasting? Are we using it as a method of avoidance? Avoiding the thing that is challenging us, which is our relationship with food and TRE. Because some people do develop this superpower. They are excellent fasters. They do them so well. But as soon as they stop, all of the old eating habits are there. And for many of us, they're activated even more strongly. So people come back from a longer fast, an extended fast, and they binge. They eat more than they normally do. They go back to foods that are more problematic for them, and they're snacking and grazing, which completely kind of undoes the whole benefit of the extended fast that they just did. So they're not getting the actual payoff from it either. And then what they feel the need to do is just turn that dial of intensity up more. Well, if that 5-day didn't do it, I'm going to do a 7-day, or I'm going to eat for 2 days and do another 5-day. And again, my focus is on, if that's an avoidance strategy, it will never work, because you're not resolving the underneath issue. So for example, if I every month have difficulty because I didn't pay my electric bill and then I couldn't pay my credit card bill, but then I finally paid this bill. And so I decide that in order to get through this, I'm just not going to open my bills. I'm just not going to get the mail because then I don't know that my electric bill is there and hasn't been paid. And I don't know that my credit card bill is coming up on the 23rd. I can become really good at avoiding them, but that doesn't fix the issue. So instead, I'm going to have to start getting my mail every day, lining up. When do I pay which bill? It's a whole strategy. It's not avoidance. And that's what I see with this whole challenge for many of us with building the fasting skills. We need the time-restricted eating skills, and we need a good relationship with food so that those all work well together and we actually have a solid foundation. We're not in avoidance mode.
I love how nicely we came back to that point that we were just going over a little while ago, the TRE. So it's just another great reminder that in order for you to do well with even extended fasting, it's really important that you build a really strong foundation and that you start with a TRE and take whatever time it takes for you to be really good at that. Because ultimately, that's an opportunity, not just to build that foundation of intermittent fasting, but to work on your relationship with food, which for most people is really, as you said, the root cause of their behavioral concerns that leads to then, of course, the physical concerns.
As an educator, I've always struggled when it comes to nutrition, right? Everybody wants what to eat. Tell me what to eat. Tell me what to eat. Like I hear this so often. I've heard it a million times. I'm working with a group of young girls with PCOS right now. Tell me what to eat. Okay, that's really easy. I can give you a 5-page document that's going to cover it all. I can tell you exactly what to eat. But really sort of creating a successful plan that is going to work for you, that is a whole other ballgame. And that is, it's not just foodless. Eat this, don't eat that. Sometimes maybe have a little bit of this, save this for a rare occasion. Everything can't be dumped in a swim lane. And that's what we want. And those guidelines, of course, are helpful. Like you should know that you should not be using, canola oil for cooking and that you should use, something like butter instead. So like we need to know this stuff, but it's really sort of creating that plan. And that's something that we are actually addressing in an upcoming masterclass. So people who have been following the fasting method for a while, we started doing these master classes to help people really learn the fasting method way of fasting. That's what it initially started with. I saw in COVID when I was so immersed in our community after being grounded from my never-ending travel prior to the pandemic, that there was just people really needed how to learn our method of fasting for fasting. So we started doing that in our first master class. We had really great outcomes, but then it's okay, making it sustainable. And it comes more down to the food and the fasting. And every person that we engaged with in the community after that said, okay, we know what to eat, but X, Y, and Z. It's not happening. We were having issues. We can fast, but then to Terri's point, you end up not necessarily addressing your issues with food and around eating. So then you just turn the dial up on fasting more and more and more. And then the next thing you know, I have to fast longer than 10 days to get any results. And this is what we saw. And I thought, oh my goodness, we need to bring in some of Terri's expertise. And then we did a healthy habits, mindset, behavior masterclass where Terri really addressed, a lot of the foundations that people need to have when it comes to emotional eating, stress eating, healthy habits, mindsets. And it was a very deep course. I think Nadia and I watched everything about 1,000 times, just try to melt all your information into our brains. And then we saw there's also a need for women to troubleshoot some deeper hormonal stuff. So Nadia, being our, sexual hormonal health expert and our our PCOS guru. She took the leads on that. And then we tried to merge them. So we've really been learning from everyone who helped participate. But it's not just getting a food list and having a lesson with myself or Terri or Nadia on a screen where we say, eat butter, not canola oil, have olive oil, don't eat peanut oil. It's not that's not how you do it. So we're actually changing this masterclass up a bit, and Nadia and I are going to model the same thing next year on Women in Fasting. But we've decided instead of more information where it's us saying do this and don't do that, when it comes to foods and nutrition, that we're going to sort of shy away from the video lessons and really get hands-on. And I'm going to take a deep hands-on dive and do some larger group coaching sessions during this masterclass. There'll be a weekly lesson on fasting where we really talk about the basics, like time-restricted eating, why it's so important. And Terri's really going to help people with that healthy habit mindset and building that nutritional plan. And she's going to be hosting some special workshops for participants of this masterclass. It starts October 10th. Terri, do you want to talk a bit about what might be shifting with the addition of these workshops and your area of this behavior change aspect?
Yeah, Megan, thanks. I think the biggest thing that I have learned in working at TFM and with so many people in our community is that just learning knowledge is not enough. It's very important, but it's not enough. We need to transform. We need to change in this journey. And so the workshops and what Megan and I are working on is to really focus on how can you transform and change, not just learn something to do for a while, but actually come out of this masterclass with a good foundation of that transition, that transformation happening that you can carry on beyond and continue to develop these skills. So for example, one of the workshops I'll do is talking about identifying your why and what interferes with that. And this is probably one of the topics I hear most often from people in our community. I know what I should be doing. I know what I should eat. I know when I should fast. Why am I not doing it? So we're going to look at some of those real life reasons why just having the knowledge does not get us to where we want to go. We have to be changing how we approach things and how we talk to ourselves and what strategies we're using to build habits that will last. I'm excited about this masterclass, Megan, because I think it's really addressing that personal transformation piece that is one of the strengths at TFM. It's not just knowledge. It is about really transforming your life.
That's awesome, because I'm saying this in all honesty, and Terri and Megan both know this. I found that first masterclass that was only 2 weeks long to be so inspirational, and it made such a huge difference in my life and journey. I remember sitting through it, and Terri, you know this to be true because I sent you messages throughout. I sat through it with my husband. We watched the videos together, which is so cool. He loved it. And I remember after a few of them, most of them, him just saying, this is so helpful for every piece of your life, not just for your eating. And it really honestly changed the way I view a lot of things in my life, including parenting even, which for me is a big thing, right? Everybody's got their thing right now at this phase of my life. Parenting is huge. So it really helped to change my mindset. It was big paradigm shift for how I want to parent, how I want to eat, of course. And it's all about kindness and growth mindset. These are all, believe it or not, very new concepts for me. And so not only did it change my personal journey, but ultimately it even changed how I lead my TFM groups, my meetings. I truly believe that it made me a better group moderator and a better coach. So I cannot wait to be an active participant of this new one because it's 6 weeks. So I know that some of the information will be the same. And I'm a big fan of repetition. Repetition has been key in my life for learning. So I'm glad that there's some components of it that are going to be repetition of the first one. But it's so exciting to know that there's so much more because, of course, by no means do I find myself to be an expert in this area.
Thanks, Nadia. That's really cool to hear your excitement for this, because sometimes it's easy for me to think, Nadia's got this down, everything's cool. So to know that you're still open to learning and transforming your life, I hope that really encourages people to know, even when you're a content expert, it doesn't mean that there isn't room to continue to grow and evolve.
I was joking at the beginning of the podcast before we started recording that I was going to make very inappropriate comments about how I always feel like I want to steal you, Terri, and take you home to be my own personal coach, because that's the one area of my life that I probably struggle with the most. It's not the practical side of things. It's always the emotional. But you saved yourself by creating these masterclasses. Now I don't have to take you home.
Megan, maybe we shouldn't be doing these. I could go move to Portugal if Nadia had to take me home.
I do have a really nice guest suite. So anytime, Terri.
Oh, geez, we can both go to Portugal. I need a vacation. We're only a few weeks into September. So I'm happy to take up shop there.
Next, and Terri being, of course, the expert on the fasting retreats, we can set up the next retreat in Portugal.
Well, we've got some retreat news coming. We've got lots of news coming. Our next podcast, we have a big announcement about something new at the fasting method Nadia is going to be doing. So more to come on that in next week's episode, though. But Terri, we're so grateful to have you on here. And I know Nadia shared how much influence you've had on her personally and professionally, but you radically changed how Jason and I think about this too. I mean, we are sort of gone down that traditional medical, different ways and different journeys, but in the traditional Western medicine side of things. And we just, each had different experiences. I was surrounded by people nonstop who were suffering and dying from diabetes. So people talk about motivation coming and going in waves. I was seeing mine every corner I turned. Like, you walk into a dialysis ward, you're going to see someone's toe auto amputate on any given day. So I had a really unique experience, and I never really understood how unique that was. And, I felt bad for my patients in the clinic because I knew they were trying so damn hard to do this. Like, they so wanted to succeed long term. And, how did they do that? Because the motivation was not always going to be through the roof. That first appointment they're having this doctor that tells them that, no, you've been on insulin for 30 years. We can probably get you off insulin, and we can probably make you not diabetic. Like, that is super powerful in that moment, but that is a moment. So what do we do? How do we make this sustainable? And we just scratched our heads. We just tried to keep the information, getting the information out, putting it out there, hoping that people really immerse themselves in the knowledge that the how-to would just come. And then we met in Colorado at a conference. You were sort of transitioning into careers. We're so happy to have you come on. And then just to see the individuals you were working with, breaking those barriers, that we had run into these walls. And Jason and I are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's so much more here. And we're actually working with you to change our coaching approach. It's not just going to be do this, do that with fasting. We're really working on trying to facilitate behavior change. And it's you that's leading the development of a lot of that and really helping to train our coaches, because our coaches are truly fasting experts, and they have lived this, they've walked this, they have had their own behavioral hurdles to overcome and mountains to climb, and they've succeeded. But how do we impart this wisdom and make this real sustainable change? So I'm really excited to be collaborating on this masterclass with you and all of the great stuff we're doing in coaching in the community. So thank you for joining us. For individuals who are interested in learning about the masterclass or anything fasting method related, you can head over to fastingmethod.com. If you click on programs, you'll see the masterclass section, and you can head on over there to learn more. And if you sign up, class begins on October 10th. So we'll see you then. Bye for now, everyone, and happy fasting.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Terri.
Oh, thank you. Bye, everybody.